Hello and welcome to another episode of the RedIron Retail Roundtable. I'm Jim Roddy, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, we will discuss what every retailer needs to know about digital transformation, and we have two great retail technology experts who are going to discuss that with us today. Back again are Jeff Patterson, a 20-year veteran of RedIron Technologies, where he serves as their Chief Technology Officer. Good to see you again, Jeff.
Good to see you, Jim.
Also back with us is Barry Egerter, RedIron's Chief Operating Officer, the COO. He's been part of the RedIron team for nearly 6 years and has worked in the retail technology industry for many years beyond that. Hello again, Barry.
Hey, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Well, to our viewers, if you're not familiar with RedIron, they're a multi-vendor systems integrator that helps retailers implement, extend, or maintain any major retail software system. RedIron is forging retail innovation and solving retailer pain points through technology. For more information on the company, visit redirontech.com. All right, so our subject today is what every retailer needs to know about digital transportation. And so, Jeff, why don't you start us off? What are most retailers transforming from? Let's start there.
Yeah, I think this might help people a little bit in that I think there's a lot of fear of missing out going on. People sort of look around and think that everyone else has got this figured out. That's not been my experience. Now, primarily I'm speaking of tier 2 and 3 retail, little 1 and 4, but that's sort of our bread and butter at RedIron. And it is not the case that we have seen a tremendous number of companies digitally transform themselves into something that is, that would be all you'd want from a digital transformation. So the good news is, you might not be far along, but you're not far behind either. And so there's time to make good decisions. I think when you're looking at digital transformation, a lot of people are starting with systems that are brittle, inflexible. Data is isolated. Even, there's a long way to go on data integration. And so even if you've made strides from there, there's if you look at what a digitally transformed retailer would look like, there's a large gap. So, the good news is that there is a lot of opportunity for you to start doing your transformation. The bad news is there is a long way to go.
Yeah, so if you're still near the starting line, don't feel bad like there's all sorts of people who are beyond the finish line, right? Having a cookie break or a water break at that point. It's
anyone you think is doing it well, probably that's a lot of toothpicks and glue. Like it's not.
God, and just to clarify, figuratively, toothpicks and glue, maybe not literally.
Yes, right, not literally.
Toothpicks and glue, though that would be a fun solution for sure.
Right, I should make a tool called that.
They should, yes. We'd launch our own company, a little spin-off of RedIron.
Right.
Barry, what's your take on what retailers are transforming from? What are some of the disconnected systems, some of the isolated data that Jeff was talking about that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the evolution of how things evolve in retail, it's all disparate systems, right? So lots of things that just sort of get tacked on to the environment over time to serve a purpose. So really, it's anything and everything from a digital perspective. I mean, there's loyalty systems and payments and just third-party systems that do reporting and analysis, and trying to get all that unified and tied together is something that, as an SI, we typically take on projects where you're going to transform a specific function, and then we kind of leave it there. But then, over the course of time, there's a return to that to tie it in a better way, or to rethink how that was done because they want to reuse the information, or rethink, how the business is taking advantage of that functionality. So, it's an evolution. Everything changes over time. Technology moves forward, and then people find new ways to leverage that. So quite often our projects that we take on are very focused on a particular goal, and sooner or later there's a follow-up, right? So the transformation is ongoing, and that's kind of what Jeff's alluding to there. It's not like you have a clear starting point and a clear end point. It's just something that will constantly change, and really it's to meet the business needs, right? So some of it's reevaluating what you already have in hand, some of it's evaluating what maybe a competitor has or is doing. So the transformation is really keyed around a lot of that, and then tying it all together and making sure everything is harmonious and functioning as expected is part of the retooling and the gaining efficiencies over time.
Got it. One of my first jobs was working at the local zoo in customer service, and one of them was running the merry-go-round, and the merry-go-round was stopped, right? And then people would get on, you would start it, it'd spin around, and then it would stop, and everybody could get off. But the digital transformation is more like you're jumping from one moving merry-go-round to the other, right? And it never ever
Right.
stops. You've got to keep
Well, the
going.
merry-go-round slows down enough that you can hop on while still rotating. Yeah.
Exactly. You just got to be good at jumping in order to
Yeah.
make sure you stick the
Yeah.
landing with it. So,
Correct.
okay,
Right.
so digital transformation. So this is going to be a huge topic, I think, as folks can tell from those first couple answers we had there, and it can apply to a variety of areas in the retail world and just business in general. But let's break it down into three specific areas. So number one would be internal processes. Number two would be like e-commerce and omni-channel enablement, and then number three would be analytics. So Jeff, why don't you take us first? Can you talk about how transforming to digital tools can save a retailer time, labor, and a ton of money related to that point number one, internal processes?
Sure. I'd say that saving money would be an ancillary benefit. I'd say agility would be the primary benefit of a digital transformation. I mean, you never know. Just to choose a crazy example, when there would be like a civilization-wide lockdown in reaction to a pandemic, and that changes your interaction model, right? And so the people who have agile and have a digital transformation that allows them to sort of change their customer interaction model quickly are way ahead of people who sort of have sort of more of what I would call a brittle and hierarchical data model that they need to maintain. So, I mean, I think you can save money. I mean, when you rationalize your business, there's going to be some savings there. But I think what you're primarily interested in is improving your business's ability to collect and act on information, and maybe how that gets dispersed throughout your organization. So it's not so much about the efficiency of existing processes, where you would sort of connote money savings. It's more about, I mean, the word transformation is in it. And so what you're really looking to do is transform your business in a way that, now there's all these tools and tech that are available to you, that had they been available when you started your business, there'd be different decisions that you made. Your business is a reflection of the data pathways that were around and that sort of evolved out of your traditional means of doing business. And it's easy to get comfortable with those and sort of just see the world through those existing structures. And so what you're looking to do is re-examine those, take a full inventory of the data that you have. So when I think about data inside an organization, there's timeliness, accuracy, ubiquity. You worry about data leakage. As data transfers through the organization, does a lot of expertise and data get lost as it moves around the organization? And the goal would be post-transformation. The goal would be that you'd have data available, at the right level of detail to the right level of decision maker, and that the data could be relied upon, has a timeliness that preserves your ability to make decisions that are appropriate to the data origin. So I think that there's a lot in transformation when we talk about internal processes. I'm defining internal, meaning just everything that doesn't touch the customer. So all the way from the supply chain down to operations and to getting inventory visibility throughout your organization. So I think there's a lot to touch on there, and I would say that defining the goal of digital transformation as money saving is probably missing the bigger opportunity, which is sort of just making sure you're always challenging your existing structures and making sure that they're ready to take advantage of the data that you can make available. Because if you're not, I mean, all you're really doing is, you're putting a jet engine on a Cessna, which, that's not a great idea. Right?
No, not for anybody, that's for sure. So
Right.
it
Not
sounds
for
like what
anyone.
you're saying is some people might, when they hear about internal or operational efficiency, think about saving that money, and they say, hey, if you eliminate a manual process, it's going to save time. I won't have to enter something twice. What you're also saying is if you don't enter it twice, you also are making sure that it's accurate, right? By having one number that just carries all throughout the organization and then allows you to make judgments and decisions better. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's right. And maybe we don't, maybe entering it at all, it doesn't make any sense. Maybe that data is already available somewhere that, it can be derived from existing operations. Maybe, just sort of, that one of the things challenges is not to think too narrowly on these. Now, in terms of implementing it, you have to take a tactical approach and there's incrementalism. But in terms of where my goal is, I think you should be more circumspect of your existing structures and sort of think through, what data is moving through my organization? Does it even make sense to be moving? Like, do I need this data? I've historically needed it, but maybe I don't. And there's data that I'm losing. Maybe there's data that's available to me that I'm not making available to my decision makers, that sort of thing. So
Great, thank you. Barry, if we can take it to the next step that we wanted to talk about, the next area. So digital technologies, as we mentioned, can enable a retailer and their customers to take advantage of e-commerce and omnichannel. Can you talk through why that's important in today's world, and then also in tomorrow's world, post-COVID, right? Everybody learned when there were no options to go into a store that obviously omnichannel was important. But talk about it in the long run. Why is that aspect of digital transformation important to retailers and their
Sure. I mean,
customers?
I'd key off of the one word you said, options, right? It's for all of us as consumers, e-com and omni-channel is about our options as a consumer. Where do we get the products and how do we get them? And being able to tie those technologies in and have a single view of product is really important for making all of that work, right? So when it comes to e-com, if you have an e-com system off on its own and you have a brick and mortar with point of sale systems that are not talking to each other and sharing information, it's really hard to put, options in front of the consumer as to how they can get their products because you go through one channel versus another. As soon as you can marry all that together, the ones that do it well get customers that are coming in through various channels, and it gives them options within the same retail environment, right? So it's not really seen as two separate systems or platforms. And if they're sharing information, in an omni-channel view, it's so much better to be able to make decisions. When I go buy something, I'm thinking, where am I going to get it from? Can I go and see it first? Do I need to touch it and look at it and try it out? Or is it something that I've seen before? I just want something and I know I'm just trying to, find out where I'm going to source it from. And when it comes to sourcing it, as a consumer, I'm weighing price and time for delivery or what's my pickup options. So, putting, e-com, especially with, like you say, COVID and the pandemic and kind of rethinking, a lot of those options. There's a lot of new options that have surfaced and some creative ones along the way as well, as far as how you can go and pick up your product. And some of those avenues were just closed by nature of the pandemic. You could not choose one option or another. You only had limited availability. So, having that that learning in front of us from the pandemic perspective has forced a lot of retailers to rethink how those systems communicate, how they coexist, and how they share information. And omnichannel is the key to all that because, if I want to buy something, I need to know there's 5 here, 6 there. How far do I have to drive? And in the future, the long term, that's expected from a consumer perspective. It's not something that's really I might be able to do it this way or not. It's assumed that when I go shopping for something, I have those options available to me and I can make my choice.
Right before, the frictionless experience for the consumer was great. Like, wow, it was so easy. Now, like you said, that's expected, right? They're not going to say, oh, well, you're not Amazon, so we're going to cut you a break. They're expecting you to catch up and, keep up with the neighbors and keep up with some of those
Right.
larger organizations. Am I stating that accurately?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I find interesting with the pandemic is the refocus on buy local. There's a lot of support for local businesses because of the challenges they face with closures and such. So, for retailers at a different scale, it's now important to have options available, whether it's a curbside pickup or multiple locations you can go to get something. So, tying all this data together in a digital world is really key to making that work. So I think there's going to be an evolution for the smaller end of the scale to take advantage of this in some way wherever they can, and that's going to be something we'll see going forward.
Great. And so the third area that we want to cover ties everything together, analytics, and I'm hoping both of you can weigh in on it. And so the analogy that I hear most frequently related to analytics is it's like flying a plane. And I think, Jeff, you brought up that earlier about an engine, rocket engine on a Cessna or jet engine on a Cessna. And so, but this is from a plane standpoint where if you only rely on what you're seeing through your windshield with your own eyes, you don't know what happened in the past. You don't know what is happening in the more distant future, and God help you if you fly through a cloud, right? You just have no idea what's going on. So you need those accurate instruments and data to make sure you're heading in the right direction and avoiding a disaster. So Barry, can you start us off, and then Jeff, follow up afterwards. Talk about analytics, the importance of that from a digital transformation standpoint.
Sure. I mean, like we've talked about with omnichannel, data is king, right? So having all the metrics and all the information at your disposal is really how you can, make efficiencies and compete. So it's one thing to tie in all these disparate systems and make them talk to each other, but then mining those systems for information and putting it together in a meaningful way. In many ways, analytics is important for a feedback loop to be able to experiment. I've run businesses before myself where I want to change how something's working and I don't know what effect it's really going to have, so I need to be able to measure that. So having everything in a digital analytic form, reporting in and being able to either generate new queries or dashboards or views of that data really helps realize the impact of any of the internal or external process changes. If you change a price or offer a new product or have a pop-up sale somewhere, what happens when you do that? And the sooner you can get feedback on that and a view of what's happening, the sooner you can retool and rethink, the next step. So it's really important. And like I said before, every project we do historically, you're focused on one part of that puzzle. But all those systems, all those individual systems have a lot of data points coming out of them that need to be analyzed and acted upon, and not in a passive way. It shouldn't just be something that just happens. It's something that people proactively should be looking at and coming up with new and better ways to make it work.
Yeah, to innovate, people typically don't get it 100% correct the first time. So you need to test and measure and iterate, test and measure and iterate. Well, if that measuring mechanism isn't particularly strong or it takes too long to get the information, it really slows down that innovation process. So yeah, analytics aren't just like, wow, that's interesting data. It's got to help you really steer where you're going. Jeff, what's your take on analytics? What would you add to this part of the conversation?
Yeah, I'd say if we go back again to the airplane metaphor, you're talking about, you need the instrumentation to know, that you're going to avoid disaster and to sort of let you see when the skies are murky. But I'd say, I'll return to the idea that, you need a flight plan first, right? So if I'm very accurately detecting where I am and what the conditions around me are, but I don't know where I'm going, then that's not helpful. So I make sure that your analytics are tuned to where your strategic business direction is, and not necessarily just sort of getting you hyper accurate information about where you are right now, because that's not necessarily where you want to go, and could just, it could fly off course in terms of, your larger strategic direction if you get really good at understanding where you are right now.
Got it. Very good. And I guess I should say, folks are going to be listening to this podcast and say the Retail Roundtable, is that the one hosted by those three pilots, right?
Yeah.
We're talking so much about airplanes, right? They'll think that we all have our
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But it's a great analogy. Well, Jeff, thank you for that. And so, Jeff, let's stick with you, and I want to get both of you to weigh on this as well. So, we talked about these three areas, but what are the most common or the most painful mistakes that you both have seen retailers make, up close and personal related to digital transformation? And is the biggest mistake maybe just standing still and not moving forward? Like we said, just sticking at that starting line instead of moving down the path. So again, Jeff first, and then Barry, talk about the common mistakes.
I wouldn't say standing still is the biggest mistake, simply because if you stand still, you don't have to explain to the board where all the promised benefits from your digital transformation that just went down the drain are.
True.
So you can make, there are mistakes to be made. I wouldn't say, just rush off and put some analytical dashboards in place. I mean, really, again, my sense from my experience with people trying to implement some digital transformation is that, you know, deliberation is critical, and it's not just a technical endeavor. So technology is part of it for sure. You know, you need the right tech and the right tools, and you need to understand your business very well. But it's a cultural change to your organization. So, you know, you got to make sure that everyone understands their role as you go forward. That people aren't sort of going to be protecting their turf if they see this as invasive to them. You don't want to necessarily, I mean, before you create a dashboard, you should make sure that your data is timely and accurate. Because again, you know, if I'm getting information really quickly, but the information is at that point outdated or inaccurate, then, you know, you're not making good decisions. So it's sort of going back and just sort of looking, just go back to the bare walls and say, what data do I have? You know, what avenues of communication do I need? That sort of thing. From that, I mean, obviously you don't want to, once you have a direction, you know, there's no profit in standing still. You can make incremental progress. You don't have to go and, you know, and try and bite this all off at once. Make sure that, you know, you're improving your data quality at all times. That's something that can be done without a data transformation initiative. Just do hygiene on your data. Make sure that you're understanding where decisions are made in your organization and that the data is there to support them. Oftentimes, you know, decision making migrates over time, but the data isn't there to, isn't going to the right spot. So I'd say that, you know, your biggest mistake is probably misunderstanding your goals for the data transformation.
Got it. Thank you for that. So that's what I'm looking at the list. You said misunderstanding your goals is a big one. You also said you got to make sure you have the right technology and tools. Don't ignore your culture. You've got to pay attention to that. Inaccurate data is another mistake that folks make, or trying to bite off the entire project at one time and not doing it incrementally. Barry, what would you add to that for the mistakes that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably along the lines of what I mentioned earlier with the project-specific focus. You know, it's something that we always try to employ in any solution we provide is a strategic focus. You know, looking at a broader picture. So, I mean, there's always an urgency to make a change and obtain more business and do things better. And a lot of projects get, you know, honed in on what that is and how they're going to solve this individual piece. But it's always important to look at the bigger picture and where is that going to be, so that, like I said, the common thread seems to be a revisit of some of the earlier projects to elaborate on it. If you have a good strategy, good strategic vision as to what you're doing, you can factor some of those changes in earlier into a design or a solution. And, you know, digital transformation, like I say, is never going to end. There's no point in time where you can say we're done. So the best thing you can do is always look forward and try to figure out where you need to be and where you want to be, along the lines of what Jeff said, and factor that in for sure.
Got it. Great. Thank you for that, gentlemen. So last question, because you've provided a lot of good information. We also want to make sure in each episode of this series, we deliver actionable information to our listeners and our viewers, right? Specific steps that they can take. So Barry, starting with you, what would be the first steps or next steps that you recommend to retailers related to digital transformation?
Yeah, I think, you know, looking at processes internally and identifying the areas of change that are desired. It's one of the first things to look at. You know, what's the requirements? What is it that I want to, you know, potentially alter and improve upon, whether it's a process or a product or a platform, right? Just identifying, you know, what the needs are, and, you know, like I say, that strategy, determining the strategy and looking at what you've got. To help you understand maybe how you can leverage what you already have in a better way. Maybe there's some options you're not aware of with some of the products and services that you're working with. So in the same line, talking to your vendors and your system integrators and your partners to understand what your possibilities are. You know, maybe there's an add-on or some features that you can take advantage of that would be really beneficial from a digital transformation perspective. You know, quite often, you know, I go out and license software and I'm looking for a very specific thing, but later on I discover it can do more than that. So there's a lot of that in the retail space. There's so many products and tools, and like I say, the interconnectivity there's a lot of options on how you can make things change and evolve to fit your needs. So talking to your partners and your SIs really will help you align both what you could do with what you have and maybe what the possibilities are for adding more into the mix and taking advantage of newer tech.
Great. And before I turn to Jeff, I just want to say a loud amen to what you said, Barry. So most of my experience is in that partner world, working with the vendors, the solutions integrators, the value-added resellers, the software developers. And too often, retailers will say, well, I might work with them or I have worked with them in the past, but I'm going to try to figure this out on my own or internally or Googling, or I heard somebody say this or I stumbled across something. You've really got to lean on those vendors and those systems integrators to be a trusted advisor for you, right? Like they can tell you what's the latest and greatest because that's their full-time job. I mean, you're obviously going to have to be on guard because some people might just go in and they're just trying to sell you, square peg round hole kind of thing. But it's just, you've got to make sure that you rely on those experts because that is their full-time job, and make sure you talk through with them and ask a lot of questions. So just want to say very loud amen to that. I'd shout amen, but people are listening and I don't want to, anybody with headphones on. So Jeff, what would you add? What actionable information would you recommend?
Yeah, so maybe oddly from a tech company, but I would say just again, the digital transformation isn't first about tech. So of course it's going to be an important piece of it, and I like that thought that you've probably got a lot more than you know already in your tool bag in terms of making a digital transformation. I'd say you want to imagine what your business would look like if you had all the information at the right spots and build incrementally towards that. It's sort of a pathway evolution. So you can't know where you're going until you get a little ways down the road. So don't try and figure it all at once. Take an inventory of your data, figure out what your strategic direction is, but then just look at your inventory of data and tools and see how you can make just a little bit of progress each day.
Great. I guess what you're saying is, like, I've heard folks say, I want to make a transformation. Here's steps 1 through 125, and they map all those out. But you're saying go as far as you can see, maybe a little bit beyond that, and then start going down the path and make adjustments along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Great. Well, that does it for this episode of the RedIron Retail Roundtable. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RedIron YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. All you need to do is go to YouTube and search RedIron Retail to find us. If you're on YouTube right now, just go down like over here, or maybe it's over here. You'll see a button there that says subscribe. Just click on that. You'll be able to be in the loop on all future videos that we produce. Before we go, big thanks again to Jeff and Barry for sharing their wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RedIron Marketing Director Jeff Williamson for its production work. And last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. For more information and retail technology best practices, please visit the RedIron website at redirontech.com. Thanks again for listening, and goodbye, everybody.